So you've probably seen the headlines, right? There's this growing panic that rare earth metals, the stuff inside literally everything from our phones to our fighter jets, are about to cause this huge global crisis, a shock to the system, just like the oil crisis back in the day. Well, let's get into this, because the story everyone's telling, it might just be missing the most important piece of the puzzle.
I mean, take a look at this recent cover from Barron's. It perfectly captures the mood right now. It frames China's control over these materials as this massive strategic threat. And honestly, it's a perfect snapshot of the anxiety you see pretty much everywhere.
A headline like that, wow, it's not just saying a crisis is coming, it's screaming that it's already at our doorstep. But here's what's so fascinating. When you actually dig into the history and you look at the real data, a totally different story starts to take shape, one that's way less about panic and a whole lot more about perspective. But before we can really grasp why this time is so different, we have to rewind the clock. We need a quick reminder of what a real resource shock, one that's rooted in geology, actually looks and feels like.
So after that 1973 OPEC embargo, the U.S. journey to get off foreign oil was an absolute marathon. We're talking generations. In fact, get this, our dependency didn't even peak until 2005. That's more than 30 years after the crisis started. It wasn't until new tech came along that we finally started to turn the corner.
Just let that sink in. Over 40 years to solve. And this wasn't something that could just be fixed with a new law or a policy paper. The problem was fundamentally geological. We couldn't get the oil out of the ground fast enough. It was only solved by huge, game-changing tech breakthroughs like fracking and horizontal drilling. Okay, so with that 40-year slog in mind, let's pivot back to today. The challenge we're facing with rare earths, it's not a sequel to the oil crisis. It is a completely different kind of problem. And, that changes everything.
And here it is, the core distinction. The oil shock was a battle against geology. We were fighting against the physical limits of what was in the ground. But the rare earths issue, that's a political problem. It's all about who controls the processing and the supply chains. And that means the solution isn't about inventing some brand new technology over decades. It's about making smart policy moves over the next few years.
And you don't have to take my word for it. You can literally see this difference in the data. Look at that orange line. That's U.S. oil dependence, and it just kept climbing and climbing for decades. But the blue line, for critical minerals, that's telling a totally different story. We're not at the beginning of a crisis looking up. We're actually already past the peak and on the way down. Dependency is already shrinking. So if we're dealing with a fundamentally different problem, it means we need a different kind of solution. And that all starts by rethinking what independence even means in our modern interconnected world. You're going to hear politicians talking about achieving total independence, right? Getting those imports from China down to zero. And look, that sounds fantastic as a soundbite, but it's not the real strategic goal here. It's actually kind of a misleading and frankly unrealistic target. The true mission, the actual strategic goal, isn't about cutting off one single country. It's about building strong, reliable supply chains that are totally insulated from what some are calling the CRINK bloc. That's China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. That's the real risk, being dependent on nations that could use their control over these materials as a weapon.
So, the real strategy looks more like this. First, you diversify. You build up mining and processing with our allies. Think Australia, the US, partners in Africa. Second, you team up. You form a group of reliable suppliers who play by market rules, not political games. And third, you use that new foundation to create a global network that just bypasses the CRINK bloc entirely. It's all about reliability, not isolation.
So what does this all mean for the timeline? Well, this might be the biggest takeaway of all. This is not your parents' or grandparents' energy crisis.
All right, let's put it all together. Overcoming oil dependence was a 40-year marathon against geology. Securing our rare earth supply chain, on the other hand, is more like a sprint measured in just a handful of years. The data shows our dependency is already going down, not up. And that's because the main hurdle isn't finding the minerals in the ground. It's having the political will to get the permits and funding to build the mines and refineries we need. And ultimately, that's the real question, isn't it? The solution to this rare earths challenge is totally within our grasp, and it's happening a lot faster than all those scary headlines would have you believe. The geology isn't the problem. The tech already exists. The only question left is whether the political will, the focus, will be there to actually cross the finish line.